Welcome to the Cowboy Office Show, where you'll experience expert analysis and epic discussion on key pillars of the equine industry, including sports, business, hobby, and the horse lifestyle. Your co-hosts are Jody Brainerd and Brian Dykert, industry veterans with over 120 years combined living the cowboy lifestyle. The Cowboy Office Show will help you get involved, ask more questions, and create change. We'll keep riding for you as together we learn from the ride already ridden, learn to listen better to our horse, and make our industry better for all. Each weekly episode will take a ride around the industry in less time than you can load the truck and trailer. Drop your email at cowboyoffice.com to receive weekly updates and never miss an episode. Saddle up as we ride into today's show. Well, good morning in this case, and welcome to the Cowboy Office, where we have expert analysis and epic discussions. I'll be your moderator today, Chelsea Sutton. I am the owner of the Consultment Agency, a full-service marketing agency that handles everything from websites to social media and, of course, podcasting and media production like what you're seeing today. I am honored to be joined here by your hosts, Jody Brainerd and Brian Dykert, and our guest, Jim Kiser. I'm going to give a little bit of a bio to Jim first, and then we'll open it up. You know, we've got some great conversation to have today about what's going on in the industry, and particularly from Jim's experience and expertise. I know most of the industry knows Jim, but for those of you guys that don't, he is a 5-time Open Futurity finalist, a former NRHA judge, owner and operator of a multi-generational brands now known as Kiser Arena Specialists and Kiser Ranch Development, manages ground for some of the most prestigious working Western events in the world, such as the NRHA Derby and Futurity, NCHA Super Stakes, Futurity, AQHA World Championships, Cow Horse Snaffle Bit Futurity, and World's Greatest Horseman, 4 out of the 5 World Equestrian Games. I could keep going. You guys have seen him around and certainly seen his equipment. NRHA number 64, right?
Yeah, and I think one of the only people that I know of, and I know there's some others out there that has a number lower than mine, is Jody.
Jody, do you?
You know, we don't talk about how old we are, because that's kind of like at that particular time, those numbers were, yeah. Anyway,
what is your number, Jode?
Yeah. Oh, I don't know, 192 or something like that. I don't know. I mean, I think that by the time I had that lower number, I think there was maybe a spot where NRHA reissued some of those things. But yeah, it's there. It's an old one. Believe me, I've still got the plastic card with K. Potts' name on it. So.
Oh wow.
I've still got mine too.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh.
But I think yours is like in the 40s or something.
Yeah, we've been around a really, really long time. Yeah.
I love it. It's the way the Cowboys measure their wisdom, by the single digits, triple digits, double digits.
Yes, I guess.
Let me pose this question, Jody and Brian, to you first, and then I'll throw Jim the first question and kind of open up our conversation. Jody and Brian, just quickly, a few sentences. In your own perspectives, having Jim on today is obviously very special because we all have done work with him and you guys have basically grown up with him in the industry. But from a professional perspective, why is ground so important, and why do you think having this conversation on the record is so valuable? Jody, maybe we'll start with you.
Well, the thing that I would start with, just because we've had some light humor about how long we've all been in this business, because the Kisers have taken care of this ground for us for so long, so many of the young reiners, the younger group, they have no idea what we used to have to show on. I mean, they take it as a matter of course that this is the kind of footing you get at every single event, and it's because of the people that are in charge of it. And I'm telling you, I grew up, Brian, you remember it too, good ground, good reining, and boy, did we have a lot of bad reinings back in the day because the ground was awful.
Yes, and I would expand on that. I think it's one of the 2 key pillars that the discipline in the sport and the NRHA was so profound in being ahead of their time, because the 2 big things that have absolutely revolutionized the modern horse show world as we know it is ground and officiating. And it was the reiners that put all of that kind of work in, and it was because of the people involved. So, and truly lasting, because here we are 40 years later, and we're now talking about, in our time, a bad reining was normal. Now it's how good is it? You know, we're talking about, because there's no tolerance for bad.
Jim, let me start by having you talk us through a little bit of maybe the background and the differences between Kiser Arena Specialists and Kiser Ranch Development, and where you're at with both of the brands.
We started out as Kiser Arena Specialists, and several years ago we opened a retail store that trying to expand into a few more products to where if you were starting a facility or an operation, that we had more implements, services, and things like that to provide versus just our arena services. Is the primary differences in them. Never had really, other than the arena equipment being the drags, we really hadn't been into any other product, and we kind of tried to expand into more retail, more full service, to where we could kind of supply a ranch.
Mm-hmm. I love it. And you guys are still doing ground management, arena management at all the major events. I mean, Kiser Arena Specialists still also operates today, correct?
Yeah, there's actually we've got 4 guys at the AQHA World Show right now. There's usually, I don't know, I haven't done the math on it, but I would expect that I don't know, there's probably 4 of the guys that help us at these shows that probably spend, I don't know, around 150 days a year on the road doing ground.
I love it. I love it. And for the benefit of the whole industry, because I mean, even from the announcer's booth, I can attest to how well it gets done and how much the exhibitors appreciate it. Do we want to talk a little bit, let's talk industry for a second and history. When we think about the NRHA and the reining industry, ground was revolutionary. And Brian, you already said this, the 2 key pillars, as you call them, ground and officiating. And I heard that growing up. I mean, one of the phrases that I memorized probably right after I learned how to tie my shoe was, what makes good reining is good ground, good purse, good judges. That plays in my sleep. And so I grew up thinking about that as a core philosophy. Can you talk about, the 3 of you, I think this would be a great conversation amongst the 3 of you, the evolution of that, from your perspective, Jim, and obviously having your dad involved, where that started, how that came, how the evolution, how you guys evolved with the industry. And then Jody and Brian, I'd love for you guys to share a little bit too. Jody as a competitor and coach and trainer and all the things. And of course, both of you as officiants, what having evolving ground management has done for the reining and I would say even the working Western industry.
The history of it, when the reining fraternity moved to Oklahoma City in '86, had some pretty serious ground problems at the fraternity that year. And when we got back in '87, they hadn't been remedied, and they were maybe even worse in '87. And I think Linda Matthews was the executive director then. So there was a group of them that got together, and obviously it was bad enough that something had to be done. There were places in the arena that really were very unsafe to ride in. So they contacted, I believe, the county extension agency, looking for some help on it. They also got my dad involved at that point. And that's really kind of where it started. We made it to where we could at least ride on it. I don't think that it ever really still got good that year, but at least we could use it. And it was one of those things that at that point they looked up and said, "Well, you helped us. Would you help us again?" And I don't know. I've never quite understood why he undertook the task. It was an unpaid position. Criticism beyond belief, everything that goes with it. But we'd been involved at that point in reining quite a while, and Dad had done other things in the reining industry. He'd been a president of the Illinois Reining Horse Association and different things, and so enjoyed contributing to the industry. And at that point, the industry was so small that we were all good friends. Mom was great friends with Kay Potts, on and on. So when he went back in '88, I believe, one of the first things that he realized was that he didn't have any equipment to use. So I don't even remember what that first drag was. I'm sure it was pretty crude.
Probably something there right from the fairgrounds.
No, absolutely.
The only thing the Reining owned was the dirt. We owned the pile.
Yeah,
but that was it.
It was what it was ever sitting in the maintenance yard.
Yeah.
So at that point, got home that year and decided that he was going to build himself a drag. And took it and used it the next year. And I can remember, I don't know, there was, I'd estimate probably around 5 years that I can remember him going down to the maintenance yard in the middle of the night and cutting it apart, thinking, okay, I need to add this. I'm going to make it better. I'm going to change this on it. And it just kept evolving. And, you know, as like anything, he started trying to figure out how to make that ground better too. And again, there's a lot of times when you look up and think, why would somebody have undertaken that task? He didn't have any help. He was basically the only one there driving the tractor, and so there was a lot of nights that he'd sleep in the judge's room on the couch and wake up about every 2 hours and go drag the arena. I can remember at the end of it, like him just being so physically exhausted that it was kind of scary sometimes. But there for a long time, a lot of years, and we're still evolving on the design of the drags. That's just a continual process, but and the ground as well. Still trying to figure out how to do that better. You know, the futurity itself has dictated that things like that evolve. The first futurity's 4 or 5 days long, Jody.
Yes.
Somewhere in that range, and now we're at 2 weeks, and I don't know, maybe in the beginning the Open might have had maybe 100 entries.
Yep, somewhere in there, 125 maybe tops.
Somewhere in there.
Yep.
So I'm not saying that the ground was easier to manage at that time because we were less educated about it, but you know, we've evolved now to where at that point we had one arena to ride in. That was all there was, and I think now on the fairgrounds there's 8 or 9 arenas that we're using. The deal goes 24/7. Next week when we get to the futurity, my staff will be a total of 9 people. We have 5 in the daytime and 4 at night. 4 or 5 drags, 4 or 5 tractors. The whole thing has grown and evolved.
No kidding. Jody, can you speak for a minute from a competitor's perspective? You know, coming up and watching that evolution and feeling that, obviously, horseback as well as from a production perspective. What was that experience like for you? What are some things you remember?
Well, you know, this is kind of funny because I've been jotting down some notes as we sit and think about this. And, you know, from the trainer's perspective, there's just so much that has gone into this. And I don't want to jump ahead, but I mean, you know, the one thing that made the huge difference in the whole world, and it was a stroke of genius, is to come up with a water tank on the drag itself. Number one, from the competitor standpoint, back in the day, there was a guy that drove the old water truck around Oklahoma City. And he used to have to go, I think maybe even Bob would say, you know, get in there, and the guy hit about 3rd gear so he wouldn't get too much water on it because, you know, the water came out at one certain level of flow. And I mean, it was awful. So, first of all, the water tank on the drag was, I mean, it's irreplaceable, that idea, number one. And secondly, I think probably the most important thing that I see from the drag standpoint is that, you know, the horses changed so much over the years, and the ground changed with them. Back in the Congress days, Brian, you remember those old horses stood up and skated, and we had hock and stifle sore horses like crazy. And you know, with the genetics and the pedigrees and the training techniques, and, you know, horses use their back so much more, and the ground has changed with that. And I believe that, you know, deeper ground, whatever, has improved the soundness quality of the horses. I mean, you know, Jimmy's on that constantly. We see him measuring dirt. I mean, it's incredible what he does. I'll share this with you, and it's the only time in my life I promise you that this has ever happened. But I just got done judging the World Show, right? So I got thinking about myself from a competitor standpoint. One of the, I don't know, Western Trail Pleasures, AQHA's got so many classes I can't keep track of them, but one of those was right before one of the Reinings. Well, you know, Chelsea, you're up in the announcer stand, so you know
Yes.
that Jimmy's got his boys, the Reining's coming, this drag is going to be right. And they drug it 7,000 different ways and measured and drug it and measured and changed depths, and I mean, it was perfect. If I would have been a competitor, I'd be going like, hell yes, you keep dragging this thing until it's right. I'm a judge standing there waiting, going, get the hell out of this ring. Let me go judge his horse shows. Oh, my gosh.
Got dinner
Perspectives change over
reservations.
the
Come
years,
on.
but yeah, it was fabulous. So Jimmy, even if he's not there, his ground crew is so trained that they're like, this is the way it's going to be. And we're standing there. We didn't budge them. I mean, the judge is standing there waiting. These guys are like, we ain't getting in no trouble. This ground is going to be like it's supposed to be. It was beautiful.
There's a couple of things that you brought up there that's some really good stuff. And first of all, I have to give my staff so much credit. These guys take this they take it as seriously as I do, and they really don't have a dog in the fight. Their intention, just like the rest of us, is to make this better. Fair playing field and everything that goes with it. But you brought up something there about putting the water tank on the drag, and I'm glad you did, because there's a really funny story about that. So that had never been done, and you go back to the water truck. Well, the water truck operator's name was Henry. Henry had worked at the fairgrounds forever, and so, yeah, you're trying to control, I think that was like a 4,000-gallon water truck, and just blows water everywhere. So, yeah, you're trying to minimize how much the application rate and everything. And I can remember different times how much things have evolved, in the sense that Henry would go around there as fast as he could and then stop and get out and try and walk over to Dad and say, is that good? Meanwhile, he might not have remembered to have shut it off, or the truck leaked so bad that by the time that he got back in it, it had dropped 50 gallons in one spot. Now you've got to come back in and drag that spot for however long to get it back right. The other thing about the water tank on the drag is this actually happened. When he first did that, he told me a story one time. He said, I always kind of had a problem with John Hoyt. And I said, well, why was that? I mean, yeah, John could be grouchy and everything, but he said, no. He said, I'll never forget the morning that I started to pull in there with a water tank, and John started raising hell about that. He said, you can't water that during the event. You're changing the ground. And Dad says, no, I'm trying to keep it even. And John looked at him and said, tell you what, you go ahead and do that, and when you come out, I'm going to whip your ass. This is the line of thinking that we've had to overcome at different times.
Yeah. We've evolved from a long way from that. Yeah.
And from the officiating perspective, or any perspective that you've got, because you were there for a lot of that, I've heard you tell the story about 85. I don't know if you were there when that arena had that situation happen, but maybe talk a little bit about your perspective of that evolution and what that's also meant for your evolution as well.
I was there. I was an assistant trainer, so I was the grunt guy. I just happened to be in that line listening, because I knew there was a lot going on, so I just wanted to hear it. So anyways, I was there watching that all unfold, and then paying attention from a larger kind of level. I think there's a number of details in there, and water, and I remember Bob teaching me about the key component of water, moisture content in ground for consistency over time, because water would always do the standard bell curve. And so the whole key was having it optimum for as long as you could. Well, the water tank was revolutionary to doing that for competition ground. The second piece on that would be understanding, and Bob and Jim have taught me that, because I spent so much time in the venue side of the world, that managing a base, and I don't know if it's because I didn't know anything then, or if all of us didn't know anything. But the point was we were just focused on the top because that's all we kind of knew. And every arena you went to or every show you went to, you got there that morning and you had what you had. So you were trying to make whatever that was a little bit better. So
and hope that you could, if it did get better, hope that it stayed that way.
Right. And with the Reining always at the end of the class schedule. So anyways, that's where we kind of came from. Understanding managing a base, and the top was the net result of truly managing ground and coming about it from a more intelligent level. All of those are details that we've continued to learn, and it's been the Kisers that have taught us that.
Can you speak, and I sort of forgot, I don't know how I forgot, but about the venue side of it, because you've been in that now for 25 plus years. Talk a little bit about the evolution of ground and ground management from the venue perspective, and how Kiser's evolution has maybe forced the venue side of the world to service our industry better or differently.
I'm not sure that it wasn't a force. It was where we're going to lead. We were following the lead because the NRHA was moving forward. They were one of the disciplines that truly was going somewhere, and they were very focused on it, and it was simple, which is good ground, good judges, good purses. And they're now working on the purse component. That is applicable in horse competition sports. What makes a good event? It's those three pillars. So it doesn't matter the discipline. Reining was going somewhere, and that's all about when it moved to Oklahoma and stood on its own, which was all about the National Finals Rodeo moved from Oklahoma City to Las Vegas. And so all of those had historical components to the entire industry, because the National Finals Rodeo is originally in Oklahoma City. It goes to Las Vegas. Those dates open up in a venue. You don't have too many venues. You're now talking about late 70s, early 80s. There aren't too many buildings in the country that you can put on a 500 to 1,000 horse show. Mm-hmm. Well, when the finals moves, dates come available. Futurity, NRHA Futurity, now leaves the Congress, because the Congress was the host to an independent entity. It goes to Oklahoma, managing ground, the creation of the officiating system, and then the last piece is the purse structure that they're now blowing out of the water. But the venue functions, yes, we have seen it. And in those days, that was revolutionary, because the NRHA owned the dirt. But it was a pile of dirt that lived out on the fairgrounds for 11 months. And the problem that we found was, if it rained in October in Oklahoma, which is common, now that ground is too wet, and you gotta keep solving problems. So all of those things were revolutionary, and that's where the NRHA created very business relationships with the fairgrounds. They own the building. They brought, Kiser becomes the person that handles that whole department. All of those things led the entire industry to do things more innovative. And the point to that is, if we go back to the 80s, you're talking about one or two events in the country in the year that can afford to put ground in and out of a building. You just couldn't do it. It's now becoming common. I can give you 15 facilities across the country that do it 6 to 8 times a year. It's now routine.
Yeah. Well, and one of the other things that we see now is that, one of the things that we enjoyed the most when we moved the futurity from the Congress to Oklahoma City was how much bigger that arena was. Well, it quickly learned how much better we can show our horses in a bigger arena. Now even the Coliseum in Oklahoma City seems small compared to so many of them. Everybody loves showing at the NRBC, different places like Tulsa, Katy, things like that, and 150 by 300. Well, the Congress was, I think, 90 by about 180. So it's, just that in itself has really helped how the industry's developed on how we show our horses, present them, and everything else that goes with it.
Can you talk a little bit, Jim, on, get as technical as you'd like or philosophical as you'd like, but when you think about different types of dirt, the different needs of different facilities, affordability, practical constraints like time, right? Changing between disciplines when you've got, a short or a confined window, different locations, right? Arizona. I hadn't thought about this until living in Arizona and watching what you were doing with Westworld and putting in dirt, but the difference in thinking about dirt in different climates, right? Here from Oklahoma, which is probably obvious to so many, and it just wasn't to me because I'm not in that space. Can you talk a little bit about, what you've learned over the years about those kinds of variables? And when you've got that much variability going into things, how do you guys continue to grow and move forward in a way that serves the industry?
I think one of the biggest things is that we've worked with a lot of facilities at this point, and knowing that they have so many different things go through there, from cattle shows to dog shows, horse shows, everything like that. One of your goals when you're trying to assist a facility like that is to make a very versatile product that you can do as many disciplines on as possible. When you get to, so that's really important, like in your small to medium, I'd say maybe even your larger facilities, but your larger facilities like Tulsa, Oklahoma City, Fort Worth, Westworld, things like that, that host those major events, you're more inclined to make that ground specialized for that discipline, for that event. And that, like you said, a lot of times requires taking what's in there out and putting something else in there. That the ground in Oklahoma City rotates 4 or 5 times a year, maybe. Fort Worth is on a constant rotation of what we do to those arenas. One week it's a barrel race, and we'll tweak that ground for that. The next, it might be the Paint World Show. The next week it might be the National Rein Cow Horse Association Futurity. And that ground gets changed, maybe not necessarily all the way in and out, but it does get drastically adjusted for those disciplines. Your smaller facilities, it goes back to, a lot of things that are determined by budget. And so with lower budgets and things like that, it's more important for them to have a very versatile footing in their arena to serve as many disciplines as you can. You'll make a lot of them good. Some of them it's maybe not perfect, but it's a smaller venue. They don't have the budget, to move ground in and out of there 4 or 5 times a year. But you're absolutely right. That seems to be pretty commonplace now, as to where, 20 years ago, whatever it's been, you got somewhere and that ground was what it was, and you just had to make do. And just like anything, a lot of those changes are driven by competition between these facilities. If you want to host bigger events, you have to have better footing.
Let me ask a quick question, and I'm not trying to overly put you on the spot, but from an industry standpoint, and here's the point. When you talk about, because the demand for specialized footing is obviously high, we see that. So if you're a middle to average size venue that now is getting demand from a diverse sector of the horse show industry, what would be, and your ground is what it is, what would you tell management at that venue as far as trying to serve all of those demands when you actually know you can't unless you move to specialized? What is the best way to approach what you've got? Do you have recommendation or experience in that one, that as far as, so from a management, it would be like, okay, if you want to have an all-around horse and your horse is not very fast, running barrels might not be a good idea.
Right. Well, again, you're trying to help that facility establish find or create a very versatile footing, and one of the great examples of that is the material that's used in Oklahoma City. That's shared between the AQHA and the NRHA, and so we have the World Show on it, do all of those events. part of successful footing, there's actually three parts of it. There's the material itself, the equipment that's used, and then the knowledge of how to manipulate that footing for different disciplines. And without any of those three parts, it's going to be certainly less than optimal. But especially for those smaller facilities and everything, they can't afford to take that ground in and out, and so they have to have something along the lines of what we use in Oklahoma City that can be manipulated into good reining ground, good barrel ground, things like that. And everything has become so specialized now that you're not necessarily going to make it perfect for all of those, but the thing that you're looking to do there is to make it safe for all of those.
Good. And so can I take him one more spot?
This is your show. I'm just, you do whatever you want.
Well, because it's on a similar subject. And so the point being, now that the English side of the world is moving towards synthetic specialized footing, and we see it a lot, and they want to now go outside more, where the entire industry for the last 30 years has tried to go inside to control the environmental factors. But now back when you're talking about venues, and I can speak myself, but I'd really like to hear your expertise and experience on that, because specialized footing in the dirt component for the Western advanced disciplines, while specialized footing, which is now being synthetically produced for the English advanced settings, and how do show producers and venues cross that bridge, because they can't do that, right? I mean, you can't run a reining, cow horse cutting, roping on synthetic ground, or can you? Although I believe Tryon is doing some stuff. So anyway, speak on what you might know there. So
yeah, just as our industry, our part of the industry has stepped forward, the jumping disciplines, English disciplines have done the same thing, maybe on a more rapid scale. The synthetics, I think probably the origination of that was so that they could have an all-weather surface showing outside. I don't think that we'll ever probably see our Western disciplines switch to a synthetic footing due to the fact of the contamination. That footing's not as durable contamination-wise as dirt is, meaning that the manure itself will really change the composition of your synthetics probably more than it does in natural footing. But along the same lines, as far as the in and out of material, that's just as commonplace. I mean, for example, the night that the cutting fraternity is finished in Fort Worth, they'll start taking that ground out, and the next event is a pretty high-level jumping. That night they'll start moving the synthetic footing into there for that jumping. They've probably ahead of us in a sense of being able to test their footing. I've had the pleasure of working with some people at the last World Equestrian Games in Tryon, and if Lars ever sees this, I hope he understands. I do know his last name, but I couldn't even begin to pronounce it. But Lars has been a pioneer in the synthetic footing. He actually wrote the white paper on jumping and things like that, and then he got involved in some biomechanics on being able to test that footing. Then the results, he built his own software to chart the results of all of these tests. He's got a biomechanical hoof that tests 4 or 5 things on the synthetic footing: the rebound, the concussion, the shear, things like that, and it is absolutely fascinating. Really great pleasure to work with somebody like that has spent so much time and effort on revolutionizing their side of it and what he's done for it. But yeah, they're just as much in tune with moving material in and out of a building as anybody is.
I know we have already been talking for a little while, so I we'll only ask a few more questions. If you're willing to talk about it, we have in our industry a pretty revolutionary event coming up, and my understanding is you will be our ground specialist for the American Performance Horseman, which will have reining, cutting, cow horse all in it. Can you just share kind of quickly, if you would, some of the variables and challenges that present itself when you think about quickly producing those three specialized disciplines on the same ground in a tight window of time? And just as the person and the team that's got to go in there and do it, what some of those unique, opportunities and challenges might be?
Yeah, I'm going to recognize it as quite a challenge. I don't think that we've ever done this type of thing before in that kind of a time frame for that major of an event, on and on and on. But yeah, you think about it, what an exciting time to be in this industry. The purses that are being offered, 20 years ago, Jody, you imagine, we never even dreamed. Just for example, between the Run for $1 Million, the NRHA Futurity Purse, and the American Performance Horse, it's possible for a reining horse to win close to $1.5 million in 3 events.
True, but I actually have the stats, and on another show we're actually going to do this. But the point is, Quarter Horse News published a top 15 ranking, putting all 3 disciplines together, and over an average per. Bear with me. Here's the stat. The top 15, I think 15th is about 120-some thousand per year.
Yeah.
The 15th top professional is now earning in purse money 6 figures per year for a 10-year period. Your top guy is doing $500,000. In our time, Jody, all of us, we were excited when one event paid $100,000. So
it was history.
Yeah, that in itself is revolutionary, let alone when you talk about the American Performance Horseman event and then managing ground to be able to do that. But yes, so keep going.
So yeah, back to your question, Chelsea. We never even dreamed of having events like that in venues like that. What a great thing. Yeah, it is going to obviously be a challenge. You're trying to prepare optimal footing for the 5 best riders and 5 best horses across the board, reining, cutting, cow horse, in a very short time frame. A lot of other variables involved there that arena is going to get used for a lot of things that week, from barrel racing to roping to a lot of different things. And so all of these changeovers and the pre-planning that's involved on, there's a lot of strategy that's going to have to go into that. So, we have to make sure that we set this up to where we don't overwater for the barrels and shoot ourselves in the foot for the cutting, a lot of things like that. So I'm fortunate that I'm going to be working with another footing specialist on that, be heavily involved in it, really looking forward to the challenge of it. And I already know this. I'm going to come away with an education from it on how to do it better next time.
And won't all the horsemen and everybody else? All of it is like
even production will obviously come away with better ideas for the next one, especially who's putting this on and everything. They're visionaries. That's one of the exciting things about having them in the industry, is that these guys truly are visionaries and want to do things that we've never dreamed of before, and this is a great example of it.
Jody and Brian, before I wrap up with my last question, anything you guys want to tap into before we round out?
I would think that, just listening, and it's awesome conversation. Probably the most common factor that I gather when something that we don't think about is that, Jimmy, with the footing, it's like anything else. Brian, with the major event venues, it's like anything else. The amount of money that's available now is is the common denominator with this thing. I mean, back in the day, the World Show used to have that old black ground, and they didn't care. It was like, you know what? You show a reiner in it, you show a cutter in it. That's tough crap. I mean, it's like, it's what you get. And there's so much competition from major event venues now. Oklahoma City tries to outbid Tulsa. Tulsa tries to outbid Fort Worth. And all those things have made it possible because these cities want the money so much, it's actually helped Jimmy with the amount of money that is available to him with the ground that like I said, 35 years ago, Jimmy not only was money crazy, people didn't understand we just got told this is what you get. That's it. And it's just crazy.
Jody, that's a great point that you just brought up, and I can tell you someplace else that the industry has grown. Trevor Brazil told me something once, and it really stuck with me, and I probably can't say it word for word, but he said, winning was easy. But he said being a champion was hard. And later on, I had another discussion with him, and I said, champion. He goes, yeah, that's the guy that can overcome the obstacles to go ahead and win. So the blackfooting at the World Show, you had people that overcame that obstacle. It was just what it was. And then something that we've actually seen here is that your more successful trainers we recognize as students of the game. They study every aspect of it.
Always.
Now.
They don't stop.
From their feed programs, their farrier, their veterinary programs, on and on and on, and they've also become students of the ground. That's one of the things that like I enjoy at the fraternity is I get an opportunity to have some intelligent conversations with these guys, these open riders, and your students of the game on why this is what it is. Is there a way to make it better? Everything like that. They delve into that stuff so that they have covered every aspect of it. And so even that part of it has grown. Talk about the ground at different venues in the past. It was what it was, and you didn't really think about it. These guys study this stuff now as part of their whole program.
I would add, this is tongue-in-cheek because it's a little bit on the funny side, but because I did this for a living for a very, very long time, and Jimmy, you get it, I know, but the students of the game, the guys that study the footing, actually what that can translate to sometimes is that you're going to have somebody bitch because it doesn't fit a particular horse, right? I mean, it doesn't matter how much somebody goes, I need to change this because everybody has their own best interest, right? And Jimmy, we need to change the footing, right?
Yes. So my great one on that I so appreciated this when it happened. So I don't know, probably 10 years or so ago in Reno at the Cow Horse Fraternity. I'm using the exact same formula every time, and it goes in the same way, and I assure you that it feels the same way. And I get caught in a conversation one day, kind of trapped, being fairly strongly criticized on, wow, it's so much slicker than it was last year. What did you do different and everything? And I'm trying to explain that this is the same formula. It went in the same way, everything that goes with it. Well, Chris Dawson is standing there listening to this conversation. And it was so funny because at some point in time, I'm still trying to have an intelligent conversation about this. Chris kind of runs out of patience, and he looks at this guy and he goes, and he said, did you ever stop and consider you brought a different set of horses this year?
True story.
The rest of the equation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the last questions I'd love to ask for today, because this isn't my show, but I think there could be many more conversations like this on this show to talk about. I'm a bit younger. You guys have been around much longer than me, but just in my short period of time in the industry, I look back and could easily list a strong handful: ground development, teaching, manufacturing, patents and equipment development, licensing and selling, retail. Mm-hmm. right? Of the business aspect of how to approach innovation and forward movement for our industry, for our athletes, for our horses, for all those things. Can you give the listeners a little bit of maybe insights or tidbits, when you think back through your life and evolution of your career, on how you kept yourself and your brand innovative and forward moving for an industry that's frankly moving pretty quickly?
It is moving quickly. I think part of it is just human nature. For anybody that is really passionate about what they do, everybody's probably driven by a piece that nobody wants to be criticized. So you're always trying to figure out how to set yourself up for success to where you're not going to be criticized. There's a certain amount of that comes with the responsibility that we undertake as judges, ground specialists, things like that. It's never going to be perfect for everybody. You want it safe, everything that goes with that. But business-wise, Chelsea, told the story last night. This was never supposed to be a business, and it sure enough became one. And it's been fun sometimes to try and lead and sometimes get drug in the right direction. We've got equipment all over the world now. Now there's a lot of people copying this equipment. It's just part of the growth of the entire industry. I haven't done this in quite a while yet, but at last count, I think that between Dad and I, we have either built and or consulted on arenas in 43 states and I think 11 or 12 countries.
Wow.
We've helped design equipment in Brazil. There's copies of it in Europe. A lot of things like that. The bottom line is it wasn't necessarily our intention to be known worldwide, but it kind of unfolded that way, and it's been fun watching things progress around the world now. You've got footing specialists in Europe, you've got footing specialists in Brazil, just things like that. And as people come along and start copying the equipment and everything, you want to stay in the front, and so you're pushed to design something better yet. And I don't see that ever stopping.
Well, I think to go along with that, that's some of the cool spot of when you take the sport of reining and what it's kind of done over a short period of time. Why don't you tell us, when you were in business school, what's the purpose of business?
I told this story off the record last night, and I'll tell it on the record since you posed.
I think it's 100% applicable because it does tell the story of how a discipline like reining can be a leader, and yet the movements of the industry and trying to keep up with it, because that's kind of where we all are struggling. And then I take it across because with the World Equestrian Games and when reining was adopted in equestrian disciplines and the cross section, I was with his dad in Jerez when we shipped a drag over there, and we were going to have reining and vaulting in the same arena, and managing the ground to have reining done, but not inhibit or interrupt vaulting. It was a fascinating set of circumstances. So.
Oh, what a nightmare that turned out to be. And oh boy, I think I actually try and block that one out sometimes.
Sorry to bring it up then.
How all of that unfolded. Yeah, that was a daunting task to begin with. And then as everything unfolded, there was a pretty good communication gap with working with them. And it's one of those moments you never forget. I can remember we got there one morning, and on the way there, it was pouring down rain. I mean, like just monsoon type rain. And we're all kind of laughing on the way out there going, wow, at least we're not the jumpers. We're inside today. Going to be a pretty good day. We go out and drag the arena. And Dad and Dan Wall took off to go get coffee, and I'm sitting on on the drag in the arena with Trig Renfro, and Trig looks over at me and he goes, "Do you hear that?" I'm like, "Yeah." And I don't like what that sounds like. So we start looking for this sound. Well, about 2 minutes later, we discover what this sound is. This was the first time that they had had rain in Spain since that building had been finished. And there is a huge drainage problem around this building, and there is water running into this building on just an unbelievable scale. And eventually, by the time that it stops raining, there has been so much water run into this building that it compromises the outside 3 feet perimeter of the entire arena, maybe 4 or 5 feet even. Had to set up cones so that we couldn't fence. You could fence up to the cones, things like that. And the communication gap, nobody really seemed to understand what the issue was. It was several days before we could get somebody in there with an excavator, dig that out, and rebuild that perimeter. Yeah, just a lot of things like that along the way.
But with the business and how does business stay evolving comes back to the core of what is the purpose of business.
So the short story goes back to my college years. I have a degree in business management with a concentration in entrepreneurship. And so I started, my sophomore year was the first time I started in business classes, specialized business classes. And my very first one, I can vividly remember the whole scene, the whole room. And I walk in and I'm kind of straight A student kind of gal. So I sat in the front, first or second row, had a clear view of the board, and it was a blackboard with chalk, and very, very short, hefty little man professor comes in and has to stand on his tiptoes in order to write on the whiteboard. And he comes in, tells us to sit down and shut up, and this is his classroom. It's going to go his way, and we better take notes because he's not repeating himself. And he goes to the board and writes, "What is the purpose of business?" And he turns around, big question mark at the end. I think he breaks the chalk writing the dot at the question mark, and he turns around to the room, and all of us are scared and don't know if it's rhetorical or not. And finally starts calling on people to try and get the answer. And by the third or fourth person, somebody says what he wanted the answer to be, which was to make money. So he writes on the board to make money and circles it and breaks his chalk again and tells us to write it down and memorize it for the test. And then the rest of the premise of his class was just that. The purpose of business is to make money. Fast forward 2 years later, I transferred to Arizona State. They had a very innovative business program at the time, and so I decided to do my senior years there. And kid you not, my first semester at ASU, my first business class was called Innovation in Business, Innovation in Entrepreneurship, business something for the modern day. And a gal in her 40s, maybe mid-40s, comes in, very modernly dressed, probably a blazer, not much different than I'm wearing today. Comes in with a whiteboard marker, blue and red, both in her hands, and first day writes on the board, "What is the purpose of business?" Straight A student Chelsea is like, "I know the answer to this one. Been in this lecture before." Raise my hand, calls right on me, and so confidently said to make money. And she might have thrown the pen at me just for emphasis and uses the red pen to write on the board to make money and then slashes it out. She said, "Wrong. And if you learn this class that way, you'll probably fail. The purpose of business is to solve a problem. And if you do so, and if you solve a big enough problem, you will make money. The result will be to make money." And sure, we all want this because that's what creates sustainability in business, right? If we're not making money, this isn't going to work. But the purpose is to solve a problem. And I told that story last night because to me, when I see and find innovators in the industry that I take note of, that's the common thread, is they are out there solving the problems.
That is so applicable because now we have 30 years later, Kiser Arena Specialists that didn't set out to make money and run a business. They said what happened was solving the problem. And I find that it's great.
Well, and I think too, when I look at that list of just the short list of things that I've seen you guys do over the years, that is what you were doing every step along the way, right? You were solving the problem that the industry had at hand or that you saw coming. I mean, I think that is what made you guys leaders in some senses, is you could see the problem that was going to be in play, a year from now, an event from now, a few years from now, whatever that is, and you're now doing it again, going into not only the retail space, but the new event styles that we're going to be facing.
Sure, and hopefully, just like anybody, you get better at pre-planning. Sometimes it's still about a reaction, but you're still trying to solve the problem.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I do think the beauty, and this is the last note that I'll make on the show about ground, but one of the things that I'm having to learn currently, this is a lesson that I'm still learning as someone also on the production side and being an announcer and even in marketing, I sometimes want to control all elements so that I can produce the best thing, right? We don't want to be wrong. We don't want to give a poor experience. And particularly, I'm always thinking about the athlete and the competitor, human and horse. I want to give them the best opportunity to show and to compete and for safety and all other purposes. But the thing that I have to remind myself is that it's not our responsibility for all conditions to be controlled or to be perfect. It's still sport. We still live in this world of variability. And when you talk about competition and even an entertainment type event, right, whether it's rodeo or whatever, the human element, the horse element, the cow element, those variable elements, and even to some degree ground and environment and energy and all of those things, the music volume, all that stuff, are real variables that I think are actually healthy to remain variables. And I give your team a lot of respect. I spend a lot of time with them on the road and just picking their brains and talking to them, as much as you guys have so much integrity and intention to do the work that you do with the ground. I think it's beautiful that you also recognize that safety is priority number one. It's not about perfection or controlling it for every horse or every cow. It's about consistency and safety and those kind of things. And then you let variability and competition and athleticism do what it does with that ground. And I think it's healthy for all of us to remember the beauty that actually comes with that variability.
Yeah, I mean, there's and it's the judging system's the same way. At the end of the reining fraternity, at the end of the cutting fraternity, cow horse fraternity, all of these things, those are pretty proud moments when you look out there and somebody is marked at 230 or something like that on the ground that you helped create. You were a part of this, making this number one, like I said, a safe event. Part of what has pushed all of this forward is that we recognize these horses as athletes now. And we're trying to help them be more athletic, take better care of them, and the ground's a part of that. But you're right. There's at the end of it, that's a really good feeling. And as cliche as it sounds, we love horses. I can't remember what Bob Loomis's quote was, but it was absolutely brilliant about some people use horses for a vehicle and some people love horses. Another friend of mine from Brazil, Chico Garcia, made a comment one night when he was introducing me to somebody. He said, I'd like to introduce you to one of the best friends that the horse has ever given me. I thought, wow, that is so cool.
Yeah, what a great way.
Yeah.
Well, here the four of us all sit, crossed a couple, 2.5 generations, and if it wasn't for the horses, we wouldn't be sitting here.
Right.
None of us would have the paths and the relationships, and we wouldn't. It's the horses.
Well, I will say as, moderator, MC, it has truly been an honor. I could sit at this table and would be happy to for hours. And I know that we all have some other things to do. I'll do a quick wrap up in saying this show and series, I think, is going to be a true honor and a privilege, not only to be a part of, but also to be a listener to, because we're going to continue to have conversations like this with specialists and experts like Jim about topics, going on in our industry and facing our industry. And so this is just one of many. And so for those of you tuning in today, I'm super excited for you to tune in and stay tuned for more. You can sign up at cowboyoffice.com, drop your email there and get more information. Brian and Jody, why don't you guys send Jim off and with a final thank you, and then we'll wrap up.
Well, Jimmy, I'll just start. I've known you for a really, really long time. We've shown together, shown against one another. I've watched this dirt business grow. You have every horseman's thanks. And I think that, a show like this is been needed for so long, because not only does it provide some entertainment value listening to some guys that have been around at a really, really long time, but it also provokes thought. And I think that's what we're after. But anyway, all of you three, thank you so much.
Well, I just, this is just the beginning of many, because, having Jim and knowing him on multiple levels. But the point is, what this show is all about is not only bringing educational and informational info too, with some good humor and a little bit of entertainment, but our ability to follow up. And it'll be interesting whether it's 3 months from now or 6 months from now, but ground is never going to go away from our industry. So what are we learning? How do we continue to be better students of our own industry? How do we become better experts in our specific fields? And so thanks, Jim, for you and your family, and thanks for your time. And Chelsea, you and your company continue to amaze me. And Jody and I couldn't even begin to do this without quality people doing quality work, solving a problem in the business world. So thank you.
I appreciate it. All right, well, we'll sign off for now. Thank you, guys.
Gentlemen, till next time.
Today's episode is brought to you by 40 Productions in cooperation with the Consultment Agency, a full-service agency that helps bring forward-thinking equine brands into the 21st century using digital skills and services such as website development, graphic design, social media, and media production such as the podcast you're consuming here today. Thank you so much for riding along with us today. Sign up at cowboyoffice.com to be the first to know about topics affecting the industry we love so much. You can reach out to us with topics you care about by finding us on TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and all podcast platforms. And remember, share this episode with someone that may enjoy it, because the more we can share our horses with others, the better our world will be.